Our last method that we are going to be talking about as far as quadratics are concerned are when there are other functions that are actually not quadratics, but they are quadratic in form, or they have an equation that's in a quadratic form. So we can solve it as if we do a quadratic, and we're going to do this with what's called a U substitution. Now you will do a U substitution in calculus that is different from this, but it's very similar, so I want to use U just like this textbook does to do this. So let's jump into this first example and use these steps here on how we're going to do that. So if you see something like example 1, I want you to notice that the leading term has an exponent 4 that is double the middle, and in addition to what it says right here, and there's no x term on the outside. So since 4 is double 2, and I have no x term on the last piece, I might be able to use this method in order to solve it. So we're going to do what's called a substitution with the letter U, and I'm going to let that be the variable portion of the middle term. Notice that if I square both sides, that means that U squared equals x squared squared, which equals x to the 4th. Therefore, I can rewrite this as 3 U squared, replacing U squared where I see x to the 4th, minus 2 times U, replacing U where I see x squared, minus 1 equals 0. I'm then going to solve this like I would for any quadratic. Let's see if there are factors. So if I want to find two factors that multiply to -3 and add to -2, I would use -3 and +1. I'm going to do this factor by grouping by rewriting that middle term. I will factor out a 3u, left with u minus 1, plus no common terms here, so I'm going to factor out a 1 with a u minus 1 left over. 3u plus 1 times u minus 1 are my factors. If I set those equal to 0, I end up getting that u must be equal to 1 and u must be equal to -1/3. But I'm not done. Remember that u equals x squared. So 1 equal to x squared, if I use the square root property, means that I have x must be plus or minus 1. Also, if I say u -1/3 equals x squared, there is no number that I could square and get a negative output, so this wouldn't be true. So therefore, the only two solutions are these right here. Now, you could take the square root and get imaginary numbers, so we could say x is equal to plus or minus I square root of 1/3. That is true. But as far as real solutions are concerned, we only have two real numbers as our solutions. Let's look at another example. So again, I'm seeing something that doesn't look like a normal quadratic here, but I am noticing that I have something squared plus, and then something to the power of 1 in the middle, and then no x factor on the outside. So in this case, I'm going to let u be that middle piece. And the substitution I'm going to say is that u squared plus 11u minus 12 gives me 0. Since my leading coefficient is 1, whenever I do my factoring over here, I'm going to end up with the factors. So this one's going to be a little bit more straightforward. So I get I need two numbers that multiply to -12 and add to 11. So that's going to be +12 and -11. So those must be my two factors. U plus 12, u minus 11 equals 0. And so u must be equal to -12 and u must be equal to 11. But remember what u is. That's x plus 2. So x plus 2 equals negative 12. X is negative 14. X plus 2 equals 11. X equals 9. And those are both real solutions. So that should be my answer. All right, last problem that we're going to be looking at. This one has a square root. We really haven't talked about solving square roots yet. So this one's really fun to be looking at. But again, notice that x to the power of 1, and then we could rewrite this radical as x to the power of 1/2. 1 is double 1/2. So this would also be quadratic in form, but I want it to be equal to 0. So I'm going to rewrite this originally as 2x plus x to the 1/2 minus 1 equals 0, because x to the 1/2 and square root are the same thing. So square root of x is equal to x to the 1/2, writing that radical as a exponent. So again, we let u be the variable on the inside. So u is the square root of x, which we said is x to the 1/2. And so if I want to figure out what u squared is, that's just going to be x squared. So that's going to be x. So let's look. We have 2u squared plus u minus 1 equals 0. Let's go ahead and try to solve this. So I need two numbers that multiply to negative 2 and add to 1, positive 2 and negative 1. If I rewrite this and do factor by grouping, or whatever method that you have found works for you, I get 2u and u plus 1 in here, minus 1 and u plus 1 in here. And so my factors must be 2u, minus 1, and u plus 1. All right, when are those equal to 0? That's going to be at u equals 1/2 and u equals negative 1. But remember, we got to go back over here, right? So let's look at plugging those in. If u equals 1/2, and I square both sides, then that means x must be 1/4 there. And if u equals negative 1, there's not going to be a response for that one, because I can't take the square root of something positive with a positive on the outside and get something negative. So that's going to be my only solution.